right, welcome back, Listen Christie listeners. And if you're here with us today, we have got an episode for you about pride and all of that entails. And if those of you who know me have followed me or anything of that nature, I formerly lived in Louisville for about 4 years. And today with us, we have one of my nearest and dearest and favorite treasures from Louisville, the one and only JP Davis.
Hi, the one and
It's
only.
so
Wow, I
great.
guess.
I know. It's so great to put a face with a name.
You know, I do have to actually tell you a funny introductory story that when Kristi and I met, she and I met over Instagram, which some people know. But, you know, as we do with social media, you'll often like meet people and you go on and like kind of like do your research. Like something I can glean from their photos just by looking at them. And so there were no pictures of men on my Instagram. And the only picture of a man was a picture of you and I. We were at that champagne bar. And I think I had
Oh
on
yeah,
yeah, and she was like, "Is this her somebody? I can't
yeah.
figure it out." And for the longest time, she was like, "Well, who's that man?" And I was like, "Oh
I said,
gosh,
he's so handsome.
he is. He's
Oh,
delightful."
thank you.
But we wanted to bring you on because just in encompassing everything that Pride is, that when I moved to Louisville, one of the most astounding things to me was the very first week I lived there. I was living right off of Bardstown Road. If you've ever been to Louisville, it's kind of like the hub. And I remember
That's where I live.
walking up and down the street, and within the first 10 or 15 minutes, I saw at least 3 gay couples holding hands. And I had just migrated down from Cincinnati, where the gay people of Cincinnati felt more like cockroaches. They didn't.
It's more conservative there.
Yes. And so I was like, do they not know that they're going to get shot or maimed or murdered for what's happening? And then the further I walked, there was a pride flag on this bar, and there was another one on this.
Right.
And I was like, where? I was like Dorothy and Oz, where am I? And then somebody ended
It's a huge.
huge.
It's a huge
Somebody said
misconception. I
Louisville's
mean,
like the
Louisville's
third
so
most
gay.
progressive city in the country.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, and people don't believe me until they come here. And I think there is a stigma thanks to national media outlets. And, I think when things happen, everybody focuses on the negative. And I'll give you an example. But until people get here, we just hosted a national gay lesbian chamber of commerce summit here. And actually, some people boycotted and refused to come because it was in Kentucky. And but the ones that did come were blown away, and they were like, "How is Louisville so gay and it's in Kentucky?" And I was like, "Well, go to Lexington; it's super gay too." So, I mean, the huge misconception out there is Kentucky's this bigoted state. Now, does Kentucky have bigots? Yeah, we do. But I would like to think that our people here are a lot more compassionate on and accepting with LGBTQIA plus people than Kentucky gets credit for. I mean, there's a lot of us here, even in rural Appalachia, which I spent a lot of time there. Oh, Kim Davis was the Rowan County, Moorhead, Kentucky clerk that refused marriage license. And it was
Who
national
had 6
news.
husbands of her own. Yeah. Yeah.
Don't get me started. So we do
She
have
surely
those.
appreciates the sanctity of marriage.
Well, exactly. And so we have that. But what I always remind people is nobody covered how many dozens of people who call Moorhead home had lined the courthouse that day to get their marriage licenses. So, yes, Kim Davis exists in Moorhead, Kentucky, but guess who beat her in the next election? A gay man.
How great is that? Sweet revenge.
So the narrative, it's always the narrative. Every state has its urban rural issues, and obviously we do. But I like to think that we're changing hearts and minds a lot quicker in this day and age than we give ourselves credit for.
So take us back and tell us a little about your personal evolution to where you are today.
Whew,
Yeah,
whew.
give us
I've
the
been I,
tea.
okay. So going back in time, growing up in Northeast Kentucky, which is foothills of Appalachia, West Virginia border. It's how I grew up. Very um, Southern Baptist, everything you would imagine. Preacher screaming at you every Sunday versus putting fear in you. So growing up, knowing my whole life, I liked boys, not girls. Um,
And what were
it
some of those
was
signs that you knew? Because, I don't think
I
that
was
there's
just
enough people talk about that either.
I feel like all my natural everything we do when we grow up as young people, natural things like attraction and thoughts and uh, who I wanted to flirt with, who I wanted to take to the dance, who I wanted to um, play with myself, thinking about all of that. Getting older, um, my natural instincts were toward men. I never had the same kind of sexual attraction or emotional attraction to women that I did with men. So I just always knew. I remember even as early as second grade, um, there was a particular classmate that I just had such a crush on. And then throughout my growing up, I remember even like seventh grade, I think was around the time I started really thinking sexual thoughts, and it was always toward men. But I always had to keep it to myself, because I was super afraid to act on it because of the church. I was super afraid to act on it because of bullying. I was super afraid to act on it because I knew my parents would take me out of school, put me in conversion therapy, and it would just be so much. So I just made the decision to fight it. And so I was trying to fight it as a Christian, and um, truly trying to figure out how I could just pray it away. And I remember one time, well, that'll come later, but I just remember avoiding it. I never dated. I'd take all my girlfriends to the dances. We'd have the best time. I just tried to make the best out of my childhood, because I did love my girlfriends and we did have a good time. I just had to block out the sexual part of the natural element of growing up as a human, which in hindsight is sad. You know, my development was late. My development started at 23 when it comes to romance and relationships and figuring out, you know, piecing through my past, when I chose to live as my authentic self. So I don't know if you know this, but I tweeted something a few years ago that went viral to 8 million people. And it was a high school assignment of the Christian Academy of Louisville, seventh grade, to write a letter to your hypothetical seventh grade classmates struggling with homosexuality, explaining all the reasons why it's wrong. And um, so instead of, you know, people started calling me and wanted me to respond to it, CNN and GLAD, and wanted to have a press conference. And instead, and I mean, knowing me and how I am, I didn't want to make it about me, but I did want to create some impact. So what I did is I wrote the letter. I completed the assignment, but I wrote it to my seventh grade self. And that went viral. And still to this day, people will run into me that know me, or I will get random emails and calls from around the world. People find me saying, I changed a conversation in their home. I changed a conversation in their church. They talked about it at family dinner, because that letter that I wrote to myself spoke to truth of who we are as humans and how that mindset impacted me as a human. And at 40 years old, I told my seventh grade self, you'll be 39 one day at the time I wrote it, and realize that you maybe tried to save a life, had influence, people love you, support you, you have impact in Kentucky. And you may not see that now as a seventh grader, but just hang in there. Um, and that's how I chose to respond to it. And I know impact was made because I know schools across the world, were having tough conversations, because people can say that it's a private school and they can do anything they want, but I would argue it's child abuse. And there's a difference between private schools getting to do what they want outside of public schools and child abuse from a curriculum standpoint. Because that's what it is. And, you know, I'm a survivor of
So
that.
are you saying that the child abuse stems from keeping it locked up inside, or expand on where the child abuse lies?
I think it's child abuse to raise a child in their developmental years, telling them they're bad or inhuman or wrong or going to hell or abomination. Like, I think that is child abuse.
Of
To,
course.
you know, looking back, those were my years of learning from adults. And what I now know is I was learning from a lot of insecure adults,
Right.
Right.
people not even wanting living their own truths.
Right.
And that's dangerous.
And generational trauma.
Generational trauma, because I know that my parents only behaved the way they did in their minds because they wanted the best for me. Because, you know, they only knew gay as, oh my God, he's going to do drugs, or gay as he's going to get AIDS. I mean, that's the kind of things that I heard from my mom after I came out. You know, she was always fearful I was going to become a druggie and, you know, or get AIDS or STDs, or, you know, and she would say some hurtful things. I remember one time she said, you know, John, my name is John. Um, My family called me John Paul. In fact, funny, growing up, my friends would call and ask for JP, and she was like, "No one lives here by that name," and hang up on them. um, so, but I think it's just interesting looking back at how I was raised, and it was a whole other dynamic because I really was trying to fight it as um, because I was scared to death, and it wasn't until my senior year, as I was preparing to go to college, that my younger brother had a friend call the house and out him. And I'll never forget, I was
Out
with
your
my mom and
brother.
dad.
He outed your
Hmm.
brother. Okay.
Yep. And I'll never forget being at the pool with my mom and dad outside, beautiful sunny day. And that was rare to have that kind of time together with them where my mom and dad wasn't working. And, and my brother happened to be at the boy's house, his boyfriend's house, and he came home. And they confronted him. He admitted to it, and our family was never the same again. Like, that's the last time I remember any sort of happiness between me and my family. And lucky for me, I went away to college and I stayed in the closet 6 more years, um, fighting it. I didn't have any sexual anything in college. I never did anything with women. I never dated um, anybody. I thought, I'll just go. I had in my mind made up my mind. I just won't have sex at all with anybody. So from then, so till this day, my brother doesn't talk to me, and I think he still resents me for that reason, which is sad because I spent years trying to make it up to him, and um, he just thinks I'm a fraud, and um, he's got a lot of issues, and I do feel bad because he did go through a lot. Like mom and dad took him out of public school, put him in a Christian school, which is also where we went to church, took him to conversion therapy. We were later kicked out of the church when they found out he was gay. He was kicked out of school when they found out he was gay, the Christian school. Um, he just went through it. And I didn't come out until I went to England and let my guard down and had a relationship for the first time in my life. And it was the first time I felt those feelings and emotions between two people romantic with each other. And when I came back from studying abroad, I just made a promise to myself that, I can't look back and change anything, but I'll look forward and never live inauthentically about anything ever again. And I've stuck to it. But it did change my family. It changed my family for my brother. But when I came out and I knew this would happen, it destroyed my mom. Just she was never the same again.
Now, how many generations Kentucky or is your family?
I don't really know my family history, and we have a very small family. When my mom died, and my dad almost died too, and he's not never recovered, and we've been taking care of him the last few years, but he's in assisted living now, and but I have found closure with him. We've had some sessions, hard sessions of him crying and apologizing about some things, and I think he sees. It's sad to see a 76-year-old see the world finally the way he should see it.
It is sad because, I had the privilege of meeting your parents and getting to spend so much time with you and just watching this human who can walk through a city and light it up and have so many people flock to you and love you and appreciate and respect you. At the end of the day, all you're looking for is, yes, you want to make your parents proud, but if they can't look at you and see the success that has rained down on your life for having lived it authentically and embracing the world that's yours, that's all you could want for somebody. And
Yeah,
I know it was really hard on you when you lost your mom and you didn't have the opportunity to repair some of those old wounds and I think Christy and I've talked about this before, but my biggest takeaway is I watched that movie August Osage County, and when I watched that movie and I watched the dynamic of the mother and daughter, that moment for me was just realizing that we've held our parents to such a degree or such a standard of knowing they should have known better about how to parent us. And when we can arrive to that place where we can forgive them for not knowing what they didn't know and transitioning to maybe it's my job to educate them or educate the next generation or break that bond of generational trauma, that's what we're here to do is to make it
yeah.
better.
Well, and I'll be honest with you, not to get political, but sometimes I do get frustrated with the left too. And I think, both parties in politics, like, I've studied it my whole life. And it is hard for me sometimes on these issues because, even on the left, some elite circles, it's hard for me to be too judgmental, considering I think so much of this has to do with economics. Um, I think a lot of racism and homophobia and sexism comes down to like to some degree. I feel like interactions I've had with my dad the last year, it's almost like he looks at me and sees shame in himself. How does this gay guy from Eastern Kentucky get to have more money, more experiences, job opportunities? And I think that's really what it has to do with, and that's how I've accepted it in my head. And think about it. Families like mine from rural places, which a lot of people will identify with this, which is why I like talking about it and being vulnerable. And they did not have a formal education. They did have it really hard.
Right.
My dad worked in fast food. Like, he's proud that he was a general manager of Captain D's, McDonald's, Wendy's, as he should be. My mom was proud that she cleaned cars in our driveway so that she could raise us as home. She should be. But, that was also an era where that was the hot job, when the boom of the fast food industries and the boom of, and I think sometimes, it's just a mindset. I think that, in their mind, I remember the last time I saw my mom, it was the last night before I came back to Louisville. I was worried about her. And um, it, we were watching the news, and Kamala Harris comes out and she says, "John Paul, I just don't think women should be in those positions." And I said, "Mom, just because Peggy isn't vice president of the United States or didn't have the opportunities that you deserved, doesn't mean future Peggy's should be denied that opportunity." And she just kind of looked at me and understood. But again, that was a moment where I'm like, "Mom, like, I get it. Life was hard for you. It was." I felt sorry for my mom, and frankly, the reason why I worked so hard was I really wanted to give mom and dad a better life. And that's part of the loss too, is like I never got a chance to give her that better life, which the last 3 years have been hard. Losing my mom was very difficult. I'm just now at a point where I can talk about it without crying, um, but it still makes me choke up, because and it's a whole other, when you're a little gay boy and your mom's important to you.
Absolutely.
Well, and I think that touching on that too is that we've all seen it in this attack against the drag community and the queer community. And Kristi and I went to New Orleans a couple months ago for Mardi Gras, and I just remember walking through the streets, never having been before, and saying to her, I was like, this is the OG of drag. Like, when everybody wants to condemn drag shows or drag queens, they to me are kind of the American heroes. These are people who are getting up on a stage. Yes, they're putting on a full face of makeup, but they're so embracing of their own identity and just, I'm sorry, but being in a gay, and I'm not sorry, being amongst queer people, in my opinion, has been some of the most loving and embracing communities of people I've ever had the privilege of being around. And the way that you
Yeah.
talk about your parents, even with the kind of childhood you had and the fear you were raised with, you still have so much authentic, deep love and appreciation and respect for them that is echoed amongst many, many, many of the gay people that I have had the privilege of knowing. There's
Yeah.
not
I
an
mean,
entitlement attitude.
we're strong people. Queer people are strong people. And look, they're bad apples in every society, in every community.
Absolutely.
People want to politicize us all the time. And I'm like, look, are there people in the LGBTQ community that take it too far? Sure. But and not in the straight community. So, like, now we have, like, so do you want me to name them? I could probably name 25 in 1 minute of issues that I have in the straight community. So, I'm like, okay, so you can, my whole thing is, it's the politicization, that word, of us. Like, let us live, let us be, like, leave us alone. Like, if you have an issue with provocative drag twerking and humping in front of children, that's a conversation. That's very different than, but also, like, what about the movies in Hollywood? And, you know, okay, then talk about a rating system then. I just bet to outlaw it, and then all of a sudden now you're attacking trans people. I'm like, do you know a trans person? Have you met a trans person? Like, you could spend 10 seconds with a trans person and know that they're living their truth and they just want to be happy. Like, leave them alone.
Right.
It's just remarkable to me, and I think it's that mindset, you all, that fear, or somebody's hiding something.
Right. Right. And that's another topic that you and I have talked about when I posted the thing about all these straight posing men who are actually on the hookup sites. And you said to me, like, it breaks code because you're never allowed to out someone else, right? That you
No.
strictly forbidden to out anyone. It's your journey when just like your brother with you. Like it broke your family, but he wasn't going to out you. It was your journey. And with that being said, the dating sites and the dating apps that you get on and here are all these men who are flocking and saying, "I'd like a hookup." Talk about that.
Yeah, I don't know how to think about it, to be honest with you, 'cause, and it does bother me because I think about my own background, and I had to sacrifice the relationship with my family. It changed everything because I came out. And so it is hard for me sometimes to meet people halfway, although I respect it because it took me 23 years, and I'm sure there were people that I hurt that first 23 years, the people who wanted to come out who saw strength in me. So, but as an adult, um, when I see other adults getting ahead professionally, politically, financially, while getting to live multiple lives, it is hard for me to see. It's hard for me to accept because I know how hard it has been for me as an adult. Um, but I also know everybody's timing is different. And so what I always say is I don't mind it. I don't care about closets. What I do care about is when people use it against our community. When people use it against or use people. I have somebody in my life that loves to use me to get the access and he lives the best life. Like he's got boys all the time, but he's straight and goes on mission trips and but he probably wanted to protect the sanctity of his family because I'm sure he doesn't want to go there. So yeah, I do resent it, but I also have to
But
respect it.
you mean the sanctity is his parents still alive, or what's the family you're referring to?
Yeah, they still have that family unit of they all think he's one thing and he's not. He's out living his best life, being the big old gay in multiple cities. Um, hitting up my friends quietly on social media, you know, thinking I'm not going to find out. It's just blind to it. I'm like, it's just fascinating how easy it is for people to be able to do that. And then here I am, like, what point is it for me to ever come out? Like if why you can't be in my tribe. You can't be in my if you're not brave enough to live your authentic self, you are not in my circle. Like I'm brave here. I'm the courageous one. Like I'm the one that had to make sacrifices and I'm the one that stayed in Kentucky so that I could set an example for future JPs who grew up the way I did. So yeah, it is hard for me to see it. And it's even harder politically when people know that I know and Louisville's only so big, and there is a whole, and so for me, I feel like how do I just make sure I don't step in shit, because I don't want to hurt, I don't want
Right.
anybody, but it is an interesting community here, and it's just it's odd, it's awkward, and then of course the dating apps grinder. I used to tell you, I'm trolled on those things all the time, probably just because of who I am in Louisville, and I'm out there. I ask for it, put myself out there, but I have some fun with it sometimes. Sometimes I just get read into it and get real raunchy. If I think somebody I know is like trolling me, I'm just like, yeah, I love golden showers, and yeah, not just to keep people talking.
One of my favorite lessons is I heard some rumors had been started about me when I lived in Louisville. I think I was like a professional dancer and maybe I was an SW worker or whatever. And so I thought, you know what, the best revenge is actually to start worse rumors about myself and spread it amongst a couple people and see how far it goes before it comes back to me and then I'll know who's talking.
I
So,
do that all the time. I
right?
do it all the time. Because I just like people, the shit that comes back to me, I'm like, who told you that? I remember when I ran for Metro Council 10 years ago. You were here, right? When I ran for,
Yeah, yeah, I think so.
yeah, yeah, I remember. And I remember the rumor was out there that I had gotten to a BMW at Cherokee Park um, with a prostitute, another guy, and I guess having sex in the car in the park. I'm like, am I a 90-year-old closeted gay man? I don't need to do that. Like, what are you talking about? Like, no. Like, but it was so detailed. It was a BMW. I'm like, wasn't me. And like, I'm the most brutally honest person in the world, but I'm like, you would have thought I was running for U.S. Senate. The way that I was running for city council, for God's sakes. It was a community. I was like, the attacks and the rumors I was like, good God. But yeah, I think I will say, I think people do come around. I look back, I actually had a friend from college who was a bully, um, later sent me a long Facebook message on basically remembering almost everything he ever said or did to me and apologized. And
Wow. That's
he served,
validation.
mhm. He said he felt like he couldn't be real and move on in his own life without apologizing because he really respected me. And he says he talks to his kids about my accomplishments and where I came from, and was proud of me. And he's in the military. He said he learned it in the military. He said some of the most uh, proud, brave people he'd met were LGBT people, and he would serve next to them anytime. And I thought that was very big of him. And I needed it, to be honest with you, because it's so funny because he's one of those guys because he was such a provocative um, person at that point in my life, at my sort of sexual prime of lust and desire. You know, he's actually one that, God, if I can go back, I just wanted to go there with him. Um, but it is what it is.
But yeah, the fact that he would come back all those years later and feel the call to validate you and
Yeah,
good for him.
yeah, it's good for him and it shows his character and integrity, who he is as a person, which I always saw that side of him anyway. I just think he needed to find it himself.
Now, tell us about some of those professional accomplishments because you've been beating your own drum in Louisville for quite some time.
Yeah, I've been here. Well, it's interesting. The week that I found out my parents had COVID, I launched into entrepreneurship. I went out on my own. And so I've been maintaining JP Davis Partners, which is a consulting firm. But the last year and a half, I don't know if you remember Tawana Bain.
Yeah.
Tawana Bain and I sort of teamed up, and I've been helping run her company, TBain&Co, the last year and a half, and um, having fun building those brands um, and disrupting, because she's another disruptor in Louisville. And I've learned a lot from her. She's a businesswoman. And so, she's a Black woman entrepreneur, one of the very few. In fact, she's the only one I can think of in Louisville that's self-made and built something in terms of, not being from here or marrying into it or being born into it. So really proud of her. She's a great person. And it's been fun working alongside her. And even most recently, my worlds came together because someone I used to work for, his granddaughter is now a business partner. And so it's been fun kind of getting to work with her. I've known her since she was 7 years old, and seeing her sort of blossom and thrive as a businesswoman and entrepreneur in Louisville has been fun.
And all
But
of this is in the nonprofit sector.
it used to be. I would say it's all in social impact, but we also do for-profit as well.
Okay.
But most of my career has been nonprofit. I'm kind of a known fundraiser in Louisville for nonprofits. So I've been at the University of Louisville. I've raised money at the Fund for the Arts. I've raised money for the March of Dimes. And I'm a known fundraiser that most people will call me because they need help raising money. And, I think people forget I'm not a volunteer. I got to get paid because everybody wants it for free. And I'm like, I'm not trying to be poor. Um, so please pay me. But yeah, so the companies that we are operating now, one's a women's magazine called Today's Woman. It's a regional publication. One's a restaurant in downtown Louisville. One is a festival at Derby time around diversity. And the fourth one is a company called Today's Voice, which sells swag and branded items and print and merchandise. And then we also have the corporate foundation, which we try to leverage to help us expand our footprint in each of the companies. And yeah, so I'm getting ready to transition more back into JP Davis Partners because Tawana knows that I'm a terrible CEO. Like, I'm great at strategy. I'm great at partnerships and revenue generation and politics and political strategy. I'm terrible at like, hey, what broke? Who can someone else handle that? Like, I can't. I'm not good at that.
Call Manuel Labor and get him on that right away.
Yeah, yeah. I was like,
And then
wait,
have him
who?
walk by my office in short shorts.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just like, no, I'm a better senior advisor or chief of staff or like consultant type person with my experience than, I feel like some of that is like maybe if I were in my 20s and 30s, but I feel like I've done that. I've been doing that. I don't want to do that anymore. I just want to work on big stuff, big shit. Um, so that's kind of the direction I'm moving in. I will say I thought I was going to do public policy. That's my master's. I worked intern at the White House in the Bush administration. I worked in Parliament for a conservative member of Parliament and studied at London School of Economics. And
Wow.
I really just thought that was the direction I was going in. And then I got offered a job here working for a prominent person in Louisville to help him transition from sort of corporate man to philanthropist, and because he was basically retiring, and he started a museum, and he gave away a lot of money, and he needed help, and so that kind of kept me in Louisville, and I learned a lot from him, and it's a lot of the reason why I chose to stay here. From having conversations with him about the impact that I could have in Kentucky and taking responsibility if I do stay here as a community servant leader, and that's what I've done ever since. And I think, no, I know Louisville's better because of it. Oh, I'll tell you, it's not easy being a homo in Kentucky sometimes. Just saying. Mm-mm.
No, but I can hands down say absolutely that's the impact you've made, because from the day one that I met you, I thought, you are somebody who is making a difference. And one of the other topics that I want you to talk about is the young man whose life you made a difference in, also that you are celebrating right now.
Yes, we are celebrating Jordan, and there's a lot of people in this community that are celebrating Jordan. Stephanie, a dear friend of mine, also my lawyer, she knows everything about me. Um, she's biggest heart ever, and we just connect on a lot of levels because we were raised very similarly, and we both kind of came a long way on things, and anyway, I've been in both her boys' life since they were little, and I remember when Jordan came out, and he was this proud. I used to tell him he had way more courage and bravery at that age than I did. I didn't come out until I was 23, but he did idolize me in terms of like just seeing this gay guy out there successful and in these power circles with straight people, and we'd have so many conversations about that. And but he was such a smart, good kid, loving kid, but he wore all the world's problems on his shoulders, and I do think a lot of LGBT people do that. I think a lot of us, after we feel a certain way, or in terms of injustice or inequities, when we see it in other people, no matter what, forget sexuality, like poverty, war, um, I think we really feel it in our hearts. Like we have to take responsibility, we have to take action, we have to do something. And I think that's probably overcompensating and some sort of psychological reason why we're effed up. Um, but he really wore the world's problems on his shoulders. He was such a big-hearted kid. Like he took on all his friends' issues or anybody struggling, and he was always out to help people or do something to help people, or and but yeah, he came out young at 13. And he just really struggled mentally, and I know his mom would not care at all me talking about Jordan and honoring Jordan and being very open and honest about what happened to Jordan, because sadly, um, Jordan decided that it was time to leave the world, and um, a lot of people will miss him, and his funeral was inspiring. I've never seen so much diversity in my entire life, and people who showed up for him, and Trevor, his brother, and Stephanie, and Carl, and Aaron, the family, and those of us who consider them family. And I think knowing his mama and daddy, and those of us who are around that family or very close to that family, I'm confident that his legacy and a lot of impact will happen as a result of, 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 of his death, and finding purpose around it.
How old was he when Jordan passed?
18.
18. His whole life was in front of him.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You can't rationalize it when there's so much mental health questions, and But I could tell you, he's got great parents, great family, great brother. He had all the love around him anybody could ever dream of. Um, but mental health is mental health, and sadly, we do live in a world with a lot of crazy and harm and hurt. And I it's funny looking back. Almost every conversation I had with him, I never really ever disagreed with him. Like I was like, oh, that's right. Yeah, you're right about that. Oh, you're right about that. But let's be a little diplomatic. I was so proud of him at speaking of my dad, because my dad can be so offensive. Oh my God. And
How
I
old is your
brought him,
daddy?
he just turned, how old is he? 77?
Okay.
I think they all can be a little offensive at
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
age.
I mean, now it's almost kind of funny, but still inappropriate. But like, I mean, the shit he says to people, and I'm like, oh my God. I mean,
But
I took,
JP, you have to look at it. Give him a little grace. It's not so much the person as it is the culture.
yeah.
They
Oh,
were
I do.
raised a certain period in the South. I'm from the South, and look, I sometimes, and people egg them on because I know my mother's 90, and she'll say things that are off the wall. I'm like, you can't
Oh no,
say that.
I'll tell you
The
a funny
hell I
story.
can't.
I Right after mom died, and he got strong enough. So I was trying to get him in because he kind of gave up. Like if my brothers and I didn't step in, he'd be dead by now. Like he just didn't want to live. He would, you have to understand. It's so complicated. My mom and dad divorced the year before this happened after 48 years of marriage,
What?
and so yeah, yeah. And so that's a layer. And then so he felt guilty. We had to tell him over the phone because it was COVID that she died at home in her sleep. And then he was dying. He had 16 days in ICU with complete organ failure. We thought he was dying of COVID. And then since then, it's just been, God, he must have been stronger than an ox considering what he's gone through, and he's still kicking. And I'm like, okay. But I took him on a cruise, and oh my God, first of all, the flight attendant, he was like, you have insurance on those legs? Woo wee. And I'm like, and then I go, and then we go to Miami to get on the boat. He goes, there's a lot of Mexicans down here. And I said, yeah. And then,
We
and
just
then
found JoJo's spirit animal.
yeah. Then he goes, then we get on the boat, and a lot of the workers are from the Philippines, Sri Lanka, like Southeast Asia area.
Oh God.
And I go to the room, I hear screaming, because I'm not staying in the same room with him. I would literally be suicidal. So I decided to stay down the way. So I went to check on it. I said, Dad, give me 5 minutes. I need to go check into my room, check on the Wi-Fi situation. Not 10 minutes later, I'm coming back to my room. I hear screaming coming out of my dad's room. I go in there. He's got 5 or 6 people, workers, in that room he's screaming at. And I was like, Dad, what is the problem? He goes, they don't speak English. And I'm like, Dad, they actually understand everything you're saying. And he goes, and he looks at me and he goes, I'm sorry. And I'm like, oh my God. So, but that whole experience was, oh, I was like, Dad, I will push you off the boat. Like, I will put you.
Okay, so give us your parting words of advice for younger generations. What do you say to them?
Stop jumping on bandwagons. Be your own.
I love it. JP, I hope you have a wonderful rest of the Pride
Mwah.
Month and you go out there and celebrate everybody that you love dearly, and can't wait to see you again.
I'm going to the parade tomorrow.
All right, Angel.
You too.
Send pictures.
Woo!
Bye, honey.
See ya.
Bye.
Say goodnight, Lucy.
Bye.
Good night, Lucy.